Could Ripple be in deep trouble and the case versus the SEC actually be in jeopardy? Based on a case that was just finalized in this video, I'm going to talk about who the SEC just beat in their case and claiming a very similar thing that they are also claiming against Ripple, and that is the case of the SEC versus LBRY. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what the judge said, how they ruled that LBRY. I'm going to tell you what that could impact in the Ripple case, what the major differences are in the Ripple case, as well as what the potential drawbacks are for the rest of the cryptocurrency world, and who Eleanor Tourette of Fox Business now says that that items like this now rest in the hands of an organization that's even worse than the SEC, and that's the United States Congress. Hey everyone, my name is Randy. Welcome back to the Late Night Grind. Right now on this channel, we are covering the Ripple versus the SEC case, as well as other cryptocurrency news, investment markets, and personal finance. So if any or all these topics interest you, make sure you hit that subscribe button, join the Late Night Grind community, and if you do a couple of things, I'd really appreciate it. Smash the thumbs up button and watch this video all the way to the end. These really are the two best things you can do to support a YouTube channel. So if you do that, I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, guys. Let's jump into it. Now, the first thing I wanted to talk about regarding the Ripple versus the SEC case is the amicus briefs that are continually being filed in support of Ripple. Yes, and when I talk about the LBRY versus the SEC case, I wanted to point out some of the major differences, and that is I really didn't see any amicus briefs come through in that case in favor of LBRY. But now in the Ripple case, there are now 14 amicus briefs, meaning there are 14 different outside third-party organizations that have filed amicus briefs, including John Deaton, who have wanted to point out what the primary use case of XRP is, what the distinctions are of what the SEC is attempting to do, and why they think the judge should side with Ripple. Now, one of the more headline-making organizations that filed an amicus brief in support of Ripple was Coinbase. And in their amicus brief, it was pointed out that it was primarily talking about the fair notice defense and basically how the SEC has not given any regulatory clarity to both Ripple and to Coinbase, as well as the industry as a whole. That one made headlines. There is a slew of other ones. Like I said, there's about 14 in total favoring Ripple in this case, including the Blockchain Association, which was another big one that I was looking out for. So, of course, when everyone saw that Coinbase is in support of Ripple, the relist XRP, or hashtag relist XRP, went trending on Twitter for a couple of days, and it looks like it's still getting a lot of play out of that. And should Coinbase relist XRP? Well, at this point, why in the world not? All right, so now let's take a look at this case that the SEC just decided on. James Filan on Twitter posted this, along with some breaking analysis of what the judge has said in this case. Now, if you're not familiar with this case, I actually touched on this case about 6 to 8 months ago. It had started to make headlines because there were some similarities in what the SEC was claiming against the LBRY organization that were very similar to what they were claiming against XRP. However, there is some major differences that I'm going to point out in a little bit. Now, one of the biggest things about this case, and what I talked about primarily about 6 months ago, was the fact that the SEC was going to try to wrap up this case and use its outcome in their favor in their case against Ripple. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So Jeremy Hogan had retweeted what James Filan had posted and basically said the same thing, that this case, it's not good, and B, you're likely to see this case show up in the final briefing and in the SEC's final briefing before this would go to a decision from the judge. So that's what was being said 6 to 10 months ago. And in my opinion, that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, there's some major differences. Number one, this was up in New Hampshire in the First Circuit, and Ripple versus the SEC is in New York in the Second Circuit, where there's different cases that set different precedents. And I don't know all the legal ins and outs of that, in which the similarities in this case seem to end. Because here's what's going on. The SEC claimed that the LBRY organization was selling their LBC token as a security. The LBRY organization also was arguing a fair notice defense. Now, the judge in this case basically denied the request for a fair notice defense. They lost on that case. And not only that, it was determined that the LBRY organization is guilty of selling the LBC token as a security. Now, here is one of the major distinctions that I wanted to point out in this case. The SEC, in going after Ripple, has yet to exactly determine what they're going after, what exactly they're litigating. Because they haven't outright said, are they going after Ripple for selling XRP as securities, or are they trying to litigate that XRP is a security? Right now, they haven't made any distinction on that. In the case versus LBRY, they did, and the judge sided with the SEC on that LBRY was selling the LBC token as a security. But here's something that I didn't see, and that is they haven't actually decided if the LBC token is a security, only that LBRY was selling it as a security. Now there's a lot of concerns about what the judge decided in this case, and primarily was in his conclusion when he basically just said nobody with half a brain that looked at this, when they looked at the time period of sales of LBC token, could determine a use case of the LBC token. Therefore, it was basically an investment with a common enterprise, that being LBRY. But because LBRY and its investors had quote-unquote aligned interests, that was their determination for there being a common enterprise in which people were exchanging their dollars for an LBC token, hoping that it would go up in value. Now, there is some cases to be made that the LBRY token, at least at the time of sales, because they had pre-mined their tokens and they were holding tokens, that's what the judge was primarily using as his decision in saying that investors and LBRY had aligned interests to see that the LBRY coin would rise in value. Now, as of right now, there is a very good use case for the LBC token, and their platform as a whole is very creative. However, this is another big distinction from the Ripple versus the SEC case, in that the SEC is essentially saying that as of the time of sales, there was no use case. In the Ripple case, they're basically saying that there is an ongoing ICO and that all sales of XRP constitute securities fraud. Now, of course, we know that's not the case. We have all kinds of questions regarding secondary market sales, overseas sales, people who bought and traded XRP without even knowing what the company Ripple was or what they did. And of course, the major distinctions between LBRY and Ripple is that LBRY does in fact control the LBRY blockchain, whereas Ripple does not control the XRP ledger. They do not control what XRP does, who builds on the XRP ledger, or even how it functions is completely open source. And of course, the SEC making the distinction that LBRY used their sales of the LBC token to in fact go ahead and build out what they now have on the LBRY blockchain, where of course Ripple had several rounds of venture capital in which they used to build out their own fintech products and networks, and any sales of XRP did not go to building out the XRP ledger or building out the functionality of XRP because it was already in existence. So nonetheless, this is not great news, and in fact Ripple could be in trouble depending on how some of the judges see some of these things. Now there's a lot more at play going into this, from speaking from a legal standpoint, which I'm going to point you to a couple of links in the description below. Number one, I'm going to point you to John Deaton's Twitter account. He expands into this and goes into some deep dives of what this actually means from a legal perspective. Also, James Filan has some great threads on this, as well as some of the legal experts that have been chiming into this case all along. So like I said, you can check out the links in the description below and follow some of these threads if you want to see the details. Now, of course, some of the speculation is that does the SEC have more of an upper hand against Ripple, and could that lead to a faster settlement? Or does this actually make Ripple want to come to the settlement table a little bit quicker? That will remain to be seen, but of course, it's being talked about. All right, guys, I want to thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end, for smashing that thumbs up button, and as always, I'll see you guys on the next video.